Welcome, everybody, to the Retire YALL Charleston podcast. I got an awesome guest. We were just talking off air. He is on top of the world, ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange on the cover of AE Insider, yucking it up with Charles Payne and Stuart Varney on Fox News. Every time I turn my television on, I see David Nicholas. David, thank you so much for being a guest here. And I know we're going to do something kind of weird where, like, I'm on your podcast and you're on mine. And
I know. Is this my podcast or is it your podcast? We're like head to head here on podcasts, but
those are always weird. I think I have about 4 listeners and 2 of them are relatives, so maybe I should be on yours instead.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
you truly are on top of the world right now, and it couldn't happen to a better person. And you're just accomplishing some awesome stuff. So I want to hear your perspective of how you're feeling right about now. And you and I share some similarities in that we both cooked up this idea of a product to launch nationally, ETFs.
Yep.
And yours is launched and it's been live now for what, 9 months or so. And it was a couple months after mine. So we can talk about the learning experience there and trials and tribulations and amongst many other things. I've leaned into you a couple times with challenges I was having with my business. And I remember being at a golfing event and you were in the midst of something, and we got so much to talk about. So David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Man, Adam, I'm glad to be here. It's I don't know if you're allowed to have bro crushes in our industry, but you are that for sure. And it's been an awesome week. We rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange recently, which was just surreal. And you'll have an opportunity to do this, just given the success of your fund. And but it's me and my wife were talking about this, like, on our wedding day, and that probably sounds ridiculous, but on your wedding day, you're just smiling all day. At the end of that, when we rang the bell, me and my wife were like, this kind of just reminds us of the day that we got married. It's like, it was so happy, it was so joyful, it was so great. So, I mean, it's pretty humbling being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. You walk in, and when you see your name, your logo everywhere, and we know the sweat and tears that it took to build it, the wonderful clients that have trusted us, invested their money with our firm. It's like all of that comes together at that moment, and you're standing up there, and you ring the bell, and it's pretty overwhelming. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, I agree. It's been a weird. So we did that, and then we had Fox News studio interviews, Charles Payne, Stuart Varney, and then we come in on Monday, and then we're on the AE Insider magazine. I was like, I know I'm tired of seeing myself everywhere. I know, like, other people in our profession have to be like, are you this guy seriously again? I told Eddie, I was like, all right, we need to calm down on the David PR because I'm tired of it. So, no, man, but it's been a fun week. It really has been.
Feels good to get a light shined on you, though, man. Especially when, we're in our little echo chamber, but I just got a magazine the other day. It was like top 50 advisors in the nation or something. And it was like, these guys aren't even making any impact. Like, their company just kind of bought their little spot thing. And we know production, we know impact, we know the guys who are really moving the needle and having an impact on their communities. And so it feels good, man, because, as independents, we don't have those big companies on Wall Street backing us up. We don't have the name recognition. When we watch golf tournaments or tennis tournaments, our company's name isn't advertised. Well, maybe it is, but it does feel good to have a bright light shined on you. Hey, go ahead. You had something?
Well, no, I was going to say, to add to that, we don't have to go down this road, but what I think is interesting about, because your practice is you're in South Carolina. So how far are you from Wall Street? Well, pretty dang far. We're here in Atlanta, right? We're a little south of you. And what I think is awesome is I get this feel that I think, and sometimes our clients, I think there's this feeling of being kind of tired of Wall Street, right? Being tired of the guys in their slick pinstripe suits and their glass buildings that are so removed from the hardworking middle class Americans. And it feels like something's happening. So if you take a firm like yours, as successful as you've been, you're building this practice far out of Wall Street. And then we launched a fund, both of us, because we both share that in common. We both have a fund on the New York Stock Exchange, and we couldn't be farther from Wall Street. And to me, that's something unique, because I don't even think 5 years ago that was possible. Like if you looked at where the biggest funds on Wall Street were, I would say the majority of them were all in New York. And if you look at what you're doing, what our firm is doing, we're kind of getting that New York culture out of our investing minds and our philosophies and our clients that trust us. They don't have to deal with all that just crap. So that's what excites me the most, is just building something great with the values and cultures of faith, of family that I think our clients really appreciate. So to me, that's the most exciting thing. So
I'll put a pessimistic spin on it, and maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should just keep building up. Like, yeah, heck with New York. They say pioneers die with arrows on their back, and you and I are somewhat pioneering on this front, because there's not a lot of advisors who've launched publicly traded products, and even though the momentum is headed in that direction, meaning like Wall Street's being decentralized to a certain degree, the old guard, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, State Street, they still firmly have a grip on, AUM flows, and even some of my clients, and gosh, even some of my family members, when I told them what I was doing, they looked at our product under a skeptical lens, because, people are naturally a little bit skeptical, especially when it comes to their life savings. They looked at it like, what is he doing? Especially people who don't understand all of the compliance and all the rigmarole that we have to subject ourselves to. There's comfort in herds. There's comfort in the old way of doing things. So we are still yet in the first or second inning of what you just described, but what you described is accurate. I think more products and more asset flows are going to go to people who are doing stuff like you and I truly believe that. And it's encouraging. You're right. Because, my whole shtick is like, my clients are in South Carolina. They don't want to get their financial advice. They don't want to be spoon-fed the ideologies of people in bright blue liberal epicenters. In saying that out loud, you run the risk of, people like squeaming or getting hate mail, but it's just the truth, right? Like, how would you like it if we exported South Carolina values to Lower Manhattan? What do you think the people in Lower Manhattan would do? Yeah, they would take to the streets and pitchforks if they aren't already doing that. Yet New York does it, Washington, D.C. does it, Chicago does it, San Francisco does it, and just expects people in our neck of the woods to just take it on the chin with a smile on their face, because they're the only people who can provide those types of products and services.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Obviously, this is your fund is such a big part. But if you look at BlackRock, I'm just looking at their assets. $9 trillion is BlackRock's total assets. That number it's hard to even fathom. And so, but unfortunately, it's just been a default, right? It's been a default. Well, hey, if I've got to invest, my only choice if I want to be in the stock market is like, I got to work with these big firms out of New York because they own the market, they own so much share. But when you really think about it, and I think we saw this obviously with Target, we've seen this with Bud Light, we're really starting to see investors say, wait a second, if there's a comparable alternative, and this is one of the things where I always say, as conservatives and even as people of faith, if we're going to provide an alternative, it can't just be good enough that, you're someone of faith and that you're conservative. It's got to be a good alternative. Meaning, I don't want you to just use us because we share the same values. I want you to look at us because we share the same values. And by the way, we're also able to compete and do better than some of these big firms on Wall Street. And I think that's almost the perfect combination of we share the values, but we can also back up what we do because you'd want to invest in it because of the values, but also because of the track record and everything else. And I think we're seeing that. Public Square, I don't know if you saw, I think we mentioned about that a little bit. A couple of buddies of mine open up public squares to compete against Amazon, right? A public marketplace where you can buy products and services online to try to compete against the powerhouse of Amazon. And so, I don't know. I think we're going to see more of those. It's just, I don't know. I'm excited about it, but you also have to kind of look over your shoulder a little bit because it's kind of the David and Goliath scenario where it's there's a lot of forces that don't necessarily love you coming at Wall Street with or getting money off of Wall Street and into Main Street, and so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Not a day passes that I don't have this like moment of sheer panic where I go, one bureaucrat can basically flick their wrist and wipe me clear from the industry.
Yep.
Based off of some, I shouldn't even I shouldn't even go on about it because I probably just the bureaucrat probably didn't even have that idea, and now they're like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll get rid of this guy. Yeah. But hey, let me get we got a lot to cover because I want to hear about your ETF. It's really I was sinking my teeth into it last night. I think our listeners will be interested to hear about cash alternative with I think the current yield right now is like 6.5%.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. But for selfish reasons, we do get to ring the bell sooner or later. Like, how did that whole day transpire? My frustration, I was telling people I was going to ring it in January. I asked for like a 2-week notice and they gave us 5 or 6 different bells, but it was like 4 days notice.
Yeah.
Very frustrating when you have a family of 5 and a business to run and client appointments stacked up. Like, what was the time lag that you got before you headed up to New York to do the ceremony?
Yeah, so the New York Stock Exchange invited us a few times throughout the year, but it was always the timing was like Friday at 4:00 for the closing bell. Okay, no one's watching the market at Friday at 4:00, or it's just the timing just didn't work out. So we would usually get about a week and a half to 2 weeks notice. So it's not I wish it was something you could plan out. So you kind of just have to, when it comes up, hopefully it works schedule wise. But this is the disappointing part about it is because of the short time notice, you want friends and family to be there. And so it's hard, right, for everyone to move their schedule around. But one of the advice that I would give you before going to it is, I think we had about 35 of with our team members and advisors, but invite as many people as you can because when you're standing there in the New York Stock Exchange, I know I started saying this, but I can't oversell how humbling that is. I mean, it's just the history of the New York Stock Exchange, just to go back all the way to the 1800s, and just to think that you're there and your company's being represented there. It's an incredible moment, but it's getting the kids and making sure if they're coming or you're getting them. I mean, there's a lot to move around in order to get ready for it, but it is worth it. I mean, it really is.
Seems so backwards. This is like the epicenter of American capitalism, and they schedule their bell ringings, from the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
You would think they would have a schedule months in advance. And then, I take everything personally. I think everyone's got a vendetta against me, even though no one even thinks about me. But like, I'm looking at like, why can't we get a Thursday opening bell? Why can't we get a Tuesday opening bell? And then I'm looking at CNBC and I see like the cast of Marvelous Miss Maisel is ringing the bell, or like, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of BlackRock gets the bell that I wanted to ring.
All right, now you made the bell ringing not as cool. I didn't. Yeah, dang it, you're right. No, but you're right. Yeah.
Well, Zelensky rang the bell. So do they? Question: When do they give you kind of a tour, and do they kind of give you kind of a history?
It's a whole event. It's a whole event. Like, I mean, red carpet.
Your people get to be a part of it, or is it just kind of you and your wife and your closest?
So, again, you can bring. I think the number is close. You can bring up to 100 people. Obviously not on the podium. Whoever gets on the podium, that's obviously it's limited, and you're not. But in the event,
That's going to be tough. And I know
Yeah.
tough for you too, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. It was because obviously we wanted to bring our whole team. Our whole team did go with us to New York, but the podium was hard because we had advisors that have used the fund. We've had so many advisors across the country that have put their advisors to put their clients in the fund, and so we wanted them to be a part of it, right? Because they're a big part of our growth, and so it's. But regardless, I think even for those just being on the floor of the exchange in itself, regardless of being on the podium, it's such an incredible thing. It really, and so yeah, it's a whole thing. There's red carpet, there's breakfast. You got to give a little speech. So Adam, you got to prepare for that.
I saw that.
They didn't tell me that until the morning of, and so I was scrambling. But no, it's an amazing event.
You kept it short and simple. You read some scripture. I think I saw a little bit of eye water getting ready to be passed. Yeah. You're like me, man. It doesn't take me much to just start breaking down and blubber crying in front of everyone.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's I'm the biggest softie there is, and I wanted to take that moment, and I think I posted this, but I read a verse. It's the verses from Psalms 121. It's, where does my help come from? Right? I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. And that goes along with our earlier, to take on Wall Street like this. It's easy to think, oh, it's my own power, my own talent, or my own success that's going to get me there. And I'm like, absolutely not. If there's any remote amount of success I know it's simple, but take the David and Goliath. It's like, in order for David to conquer Goliath, he practiced that slingshot, I'm sure, many times, killed lions, killed bears, but there's a supernatural element of success. And I think that was, for me, being up there, as small as we are, it was, hey, God is guiding us. He's giving us wisdom. If any success that we have, it's our hard work, but God ultimately, provides the true success. So it's pretty powerful.
Love it, dude. It's spot on. And I had the same interaction with the guy who does our trading. I was like, it's a God thing right now. But hey, I want to ask like an X's and O's thing again, because literally this is heavy on my mind right now. Your team, did you just like coordinate all the flights, and did you pay for the flights, or was it like you give them each a budget, like come if you want or don't come, doesn't matter? Like, well, how did that work?
Yeah, so I'm gonna get you in trouble here, because how much do you want to spend on this? Might determine my answer.
I already know it's going to be a costly endeavor, you know? So what did you do?
So we talked about this, and so me and my wife were like, hey, what do we want to do? It's obviously a big expense to bring the whole team. So at first I was like, hey, we'll bring our advisors. There's 2 or 3 advisors, and obviously they're on the front line with clients. And then we were talking one night, and we were just like, you know what? As ridiculously expensive as this is, let's bring our team, because we really couldn't be there without them, and we knew it was going to be exciting, but the joy, we just wanted them to all share the joy. So we brought our whole team up, and we put them up in New York, and so it's not cheap, but again, I don't know if everyone has to do that, but it was just, and we're also, I think, maybe a little smaller than your office, so we were able to do that. But brought the team up, put them up in New York. We stayed at this hotel, Wall Street Hotel. I'd recommend. So right next to the New York Stock Exchange, there's this brand new hotel called the Wall Street Hotel. It is beautiful, pretty cost effective. So I can give you all those details, man. But it was.
I love it. Yeah, I want, as you said, I want these people. They give our little companies a pound of their flesh. They could work a lot of other places. I want them to be a part of this celebration as well. But it starts adding up when you fly in 20 people. The annoying thing to me is not necessarily the cost, even though I know that will be cumbersome. It's, I don't want to be their travel agent. Like, I don't want to. Did you just assign someone to do because Lord knows I don't need, one of my people while I'm trying to celebrate the biggest moment of my life, complaining about, them not being able to check into their hotel room.
We had a massive Excel sheet. Here, here's what I would actually recommend that you do. Let your team book their own flights. This is like so insider baseball. So like, for those that are listening, sorry, this is me and Adams, but I would just let your team book their own flights and just reimburse them. Just say, hey, I'll reimburse you up to $400, whatever it is. That was a massive headache. So let them book their own flights. Maybe you could room block the hotel. That right there will save you about 100 hours of work right there.
All right. Thank you everyone for entertaining that. I like, this is like stuff that's heavy on my heart.
But man, I'd love to talk about your ETF because, I think for our listeners here in Atlanta, I was just showing someone on my team, Cindy. I was like, hey, I'm interviewing Adam. I'm going to be on with Adam today. And I was like, here's his ETF. And I was like, you pull up his website for a second. And she just was loving it. She goes, her dad's up in Michigan. She's like, I'm calling my dad right now. He needs to buy this fund because he's going to love this. So if you talk to me a little bit about, because I get the reason for the fund, I think to a degree, but just tell me a little bit about what started this, because I will say you are the first. You could say that I piggybacked on you, but there really wasn't. I don't know of any other financial advisor at our independent level, and I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know. But in our world of independent advisors that have actually launched their own ETF, so it had to have been something that motivated you, to push you to get this thing started. And I'd love to just kind of hear kind of the background of that.
Well, I tell you, there's a guy in the AE network, John. Gosh, I'm going to butcher his last name, but he was sitting on a stage one time talking about an ETF, and I was like, "Oh, there's an idea." So I did ride, someone else's coattails in our network, but I didn't even think that was feasible. I didn't think it was possible until I started making the rounds and calling all the white glove issuers, and remind me to talk to you about, like, knowing what you know now. Would you recommend other advisors walk this walk? Because I've had 3 or 4 people come up to me, and
no
arching advice is like, buyer beware. Don't think for a second this is like the pill that's going to cure all that ails you. It is not.
Yeah, don't take the excitement in my voice as this is an enjoyable process. In some ways, I'd rather go get my prostate checked each day versus having to manage this fund. But that's just the reality. We can definitely talk about that.
But you have to quantify the excitement in your voice. You have to quantify the excitement inside your office. How much was that trip to the New York Stock Exchange worth when you're in your deathbed and you look back, right? So, because you could probably tell me how much it was to put your entire team up at Wall Street Hotel. But anyways, I digress. So yeah, I know you've had this conversation with multitudes of your clients and prospects. People come into your office and they say, "Hey, I want to invest in the stock market. It's been very good to me. It's the reason I have $1 million. I've accumulated some wealth by putting my money in mutual funds and index funds. But did you hear what Budweiser did? Did you hear what Coca-Cola said? Did you hear what XYZ business said? I don't want any of my money supporting this business because they do not share my values. They don't see the world through the same lens as me. And I'm not okay with my money going into that company." And you know what most advisors say, and I said it for years. I'm sure you've said it too. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, part of investing in the stock market, we use low-cost index funds. We diversify your money across all the different sectors. And unfortunately, some of your money might be siphoned to those business, but boy, they've been performing wonderful as of late. And, no big deal. You're going to own some of it, but just, hold your nose, tolerate it, deal with it, because that's what you have to do. People have to buy those businesses. And in my opinion, I got tired of saying that. I got tired of looking people in the eye and them expressing a concern and a desire to not support businesses that don't share their worldview, and me saying, tough, you got to own it. So we created our fund specifically to boycott companies that were participating in what we believe to be activism, right? So right there in your backyard in Georgia, you wouldn't believe the number of publicly traded companies that felt the need to sign the We Stand for Democracy pledge. The We Stand for Democracy pledge was a newspaper advertisement that appeared in the Washington Post and the New York Times days after Georgia's election reform bill passed, which was immediately called Jim Crow 2.0. And we have publicly traded companies virtue signaling, telling the people of Georgia that they're passing legislation that's comparable to Jim Crow 2.0. Fast forward a year or two later, Y'all had a record voter turnout, a record minority voter turnout. So, in our opinion, if you're a publicly traded company that signed that pledge, that virtue signaled in that way, you took your eye off the ball of operating a wonderful business. A business should focus all of their time and energy on delighting their customers, creating wonderful products and services, employing a motivated and well-compensated workforce, and separating people from their money.
Yep.
If you felt the need to sign the We Stand for Democracy pledge, you weren't conducting business in a way in which you were trying to improve your shareholders' net worth. You were participating in activism.
And can I just add to that? I'm sorry. And the bullying. So the only reason this hits a hard spot for me is because the All-Star game, this would have been 2 years ago. We had the All-Star game in Atlanta. And I'll tell you, if you've ever been down to an Atlanta Braves game here, our office is about 10 minutes from the stadium. The workers, there's all these restaurants and shops that when I say they need these jobs. And I remember they calculated the cost that those workers and those businesses lost because of this very thing. That the Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game because of this We Stand for Democracy crap that they try to push. And it's like, you talk about just flat out just being a jerk. So the people that may even be buying your products and services, you've ripped the opportunity for them to provide for their families and to have income. And I just like that in itself should just tick anyone off enough to not want to invest in one of these companies. So I'm right there with you.
And you got that. The other things that we used to boycott company was Florida's parental rights and education bill. You know, the number of publicly traded companies that felt the need to virtue signal and call Florida's parental rights and education bill the Don't Say Gay bill, as if there was this homophobic undertone within that bill, when if you actually read the legislation, it simply says, we will not teach lessons about sexuality and gender ideology to children under third grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got a kid who's under third grade. Like, can you imagine the creep that would want to harp in their ear about sexuality?
Yeah. It's a religion for these people. I mean, it really is. It's their religion to brainwash these poor kids, and it's disgusting. It's evil. It's the only way you can describe it.
Yeah, and then finally the big one, which was probably our biggest elimination mechanism. There was the business roundtable pledge, where companies signed off declaring that they will no longer work for their shareholders, but they will work for their stakeholders, which at face value actually sounds altruistic. They're basically saying, hey, our job as a business is not just to serve our shareholders. We're here to serve our community and our employees and our distributors and our suppliers. And, at face value, that sounds, oh, that's really nice. Kumbaya. Let's all sit around a fire and, applaud each other and look at each other through our nostrils. But what that Trojan horsed in to the vernacular of corporate boardrooms is your stakeholders. One of those is your community. So if you want to be a good corporation to your community, well, you must be environmentally sound. If you want to be a good corporation to your employees, well, you must maintain a certain level of diversity within your workforce. If you want to be a good corporation for your community, so ESG is what I'm getting at, right? Yep. So naturally, our fund has been called anti-ESG, but in reality, we don't even care about ESG. In fact, some of our components within our fund, I think, have good ESG scores. I've never even looked at them. But our opinion, by signing that stakeholder pledge, you were no longer focused on your shareholders and running a great business. You entered the realm of activism. So in essence, what we did, just to bring this to a close, we looked at all these world events, including Roe v. Wade, the number of companies that felt the need to, use the Roe v. Wade ruling in their marketing fodder. Don't get me started. If you're a company that used these types of instances, Florida's parental rights in education, Georgia's election reform, Roe v. Wade, the business roundtable stakeholder capital thing, we believe you weren't focused on business. You weren't focused on your customers, because by taking a stand on this stuff, David, you're offending 49 to 51% of your employees, your customers, your shareholders. That's not good business. So if you took a stand on this stuff, we eliminated you from our investment universe. And then we took what was left over, which I learned, if there's 500 companies in the S&P 500, only about 200 companies were the loudmouths. Only 200 were participating in activism, which was encouraging, because when I told people what I was doing,
it's everybody.
Yeah, you think it's everyone. It's the vocal minority. Now, the minority here is 40%, which is a little troubling. But it is a minority. Most companies aren't doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So we had 300 companies. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges that we have, you know how the S&P is weighted from a market cap perspective, right? Yeah. So Apple represents like 6% of the S&P 500. Well, what do you know? Apple just so happens to be one of the companies that feels the need to, go on and on about every single hot button social issue that's dividing our nation.
And so you got to eliminate them.
Yeah, a lot of the big mega caps we've had to eliminate. And then ultimately what was left over, we try to balance it based off of market cap, based off of sector, as to mirror the S&P 500, right? So we're basically created an index fund in our heads, right? Compliance. By the way, compliance. Don't buy my fund. Just don't buy it. I don't know how I could say it more clearly. I'm not recommending you buy my fund. I'm just talking about this zany idea I had in order to create a fund. And same with David. Nothing I'm saying is telling you to buy David's fund.
This is not a recommendation to buy. You could lose all of your money.
There you go. Not a recommendation to buy. Investing involves risk. Just put all your money in BlackRock. That's the right way to go, apparently. But anyways, put a pin in that. So we're trying to create something that has the similar weighting as the S&P 500.
Yep.
And anyways, so almost in theory, you got your bond component with the, Nicholas fixed income alternative, and you got your equity component with the God Bless America ETF. Work with a qualified advisor. But you can, in essence, create a portfolio with those two tickers if you wanted to.
Well, and just for our clients that haven't heard about it, so the ticker symbol is YALL, which is just how you thought of like. I would love to know the day that you were like, oh, let me check what tickers are available. Let me see if YALL is available. Did something inside of you just jump up and down a little bit when you found out that it was available?
Yeah. So the guy, Gavin, you worked with him as well. Like when we were in initial conversations, I think he locked down the ticker because he saw, the name of my book is Retire YALL. Our website is Retire YALL. Everything's YALL branded, which I just learned, David, is the most inclusive of all pronouns. The New York Times told me that. So, look at me being inclusive. So he locked it down, and then, he's like, hey, just by the way, this is on like our second visit. He's like, just by the way, I have YALL for you.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Good move. Tip my hat to him.
If you go to the website, I love the tagline. It just says YALL is the ticker, an investment for God-fearing, flag-waving conservatives. So I don't know if there's any God-fearing, flag-waving conservatives that are listening to this podcast, but if so, this is a fund that I think you should check out. And like Adam, that you just said, again, not a recommendation. You have to make sure you meet your own risk tolerance. But if you think about it, for most portfolios, you're going to have a fixed income component, which is bonds, something that's more conservative in the portfolio, and then you're going to have an equity component. And so, what I love about, Adam, I don't know if you knew what NVIDIA was going to do this year. I'm sure your research gave you some insight, but I'm looking here. If you don't mind, your number one holding in the portfolio is NVIDIA. Well, are you kidding me? NVIDIA just had the best year I'd have to go back and see. Just tremendous growth for NVIDIA. So that's a name that's in the portfolio. If I look here at what's the second biggest holding, you can probably rattle this off, but you've got Tesla. So NVIDIA and Tesla are your top two holdings in the fund. I love it. And I love that you've got it cap, so it's not equal weighted. So you actually are putting some weight behind. Obviously, the S&P is a cap weighted index. So man, I love it. Congrats, and I really do think there's a place for this if you're someone that, like we talked about earlier, is just tired of lining the pockets of some of these massive fund companies who really, they take our money, our hard-earned money, and they funnel it to the very causes that go against our values, in many ways can go against our faith. And so I don't know. I think this is a small way that anyone can play a part in just letting your money align with your values and your faith. So pretty powerful stuff.
And I get it. Like, if there's been 100 articles written about our fund, 99 of them are negative in nature, right? They call it unenlightened. They call it thematic. They always point to expense ratio and they compare us to like, Vanguard's index fund that has a 0 expense ratio. It's like, or here's the other thing they did. As of late, what they've been doing is they've been saying, the anti-ESG funds don't have as much AUM as the ESG funds. And it's like, yeah, because the ESG funds have been around for 20 years and the California pension fund is forcing people's money to go into ESG funds. So it's just kind of like this, this game that the media plays to kind of put a disparaging look at your fund.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one other moment that I had, and you had to have like another like client interaction moment, because what you laid out is like, hey, this is exactly what the world needs. Product market fit. I deal with consumers. This is what consumers want. They want principal protection. They want yield. They want monthly income. I had a moment with a guy and we're having the same interaction. I don't want to support this company. I don't want to support this company. And he said out loud, he goes, I would even be okay if my performance lagged the S&P 500 by a couple percentage points every now and again, if I knew none of my money was going to support these businesses.
Ooh,
and a big light bulb went off. I was like, okay, because now this isn't just a commoditized belief. This is almost like a revolution. This is like a religion. It's a bad word to use, but this is people who are saying to me, I don't need you to track the S&P 500. I need you to put something together that I could feel good about owning. I need you to put something together that's going to give me growth potential, but doesn't support these businesses that are trouncing on my values and my beliefs.
I love it.
Luckily, we're about 1 year into it. Our performance, you could look it up yourself, has done really well. I'm starting to drink my own Kool-Aid now, where I'm like, because I created the fund not necessarily with a performance vision in mind. I wanted it to track the overall market the best it could. Well, we're 1 year into it, and it's performing pretty well. Look it up, disclosures, go to the website, all that. But I'm starting to say, yeah, maybe focusing on business and not activism actually bodes well for your stock price.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that actually does translate to, because look at your business and my business. Can you imagine if you know how hard it is every waking hour of your life, you're having pillow talk with your wife about business. You think about business. Like, I can't run anything I hear about but through the lens of my business and how it's going to affect my clients. Can you imagine if you just had this elephant in the room where you're like focused on like social justice activism?
Oh, I was watching Tucker Carlson has his show on Twitter X now, and Dave Portnoy, who his story obviously he bought back his company. But he said I don't know if you saw this, but when he bought back his company from Penn, right? He walks in back he sold the business to Penn. ESPN bought Penn. Obviously, ESPN is about as far woke as you can get. And so Dave Portnoy was a risk for them. So he gave the company back. And so he says, the first day I walked back into the company that I just sold and I now bought back. And he said, at the front desk, there was this see something, say something. Now remember, this is a publicly traded company that owned it. And what they essentially had was they wanted the employees to basically tattle on the other employees if there was something that was anti ESG or anti-woke or that you could go and tattle on your coworker and they would take that to the high. And I'm like, what kind of work environment is that you were literally policing your employees because if they're not adhering to these woke, these what is a religion of woke in the corporation. And so what you're just saying is that has to affect the bottom line. I let Dave Portner. So the first thing I did, I took that NARC sheet and I threw it right in the trash. He's like, if you've got an issue, you just say it. And I just think that is it's a micro picture of what a lot of these corporations, I couldn't imagine working at one of these corporations where I'm constantly having to look over my back of, did I say something wrong? Did I do something that, I shouldn't do in a workplace? I mean, it's just, and some of it goes, and I don't know, it's obviously a little bit different, but I know Cody had messaged us, Cody Foster, that the Oliver Anthony song, there's a sentiment there that I think is it's obviously brewing in politics, but I don't know. I just think people are just tired, the lyrics to that song, obviously it's a play on words, rich men north of Richmond. Have you ever looked at a map of Richmond and what's north of there? Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that there's something that's brewing that I think hardworking middle-class Americans are just tired of feeling the squeeze of inflation. They're tired of feeling the squeeze of taxes, which is what he talks about in a song. And I think we're now saying enough is enough, just like our founders threw tea into the Boston Harbor. I mean, I think at some point you say, you know what, I've got to act. And one of the small ways I can act is I'm not going to invest my money in places that are actively working against my values. And that to me is what I think is the most encouraging, most exciting.
Have you seen the viral video of Larry Fink? He's on a stage and he's saying, like, we need to force corporations to behave this way. And it's like, what? What's going on here? Because when you look at the percentage of shares Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock own of these publicly traded businesses, they have all of the proxy power to populate their boards how they see fit.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is also to our listeners. If you own a BlackRock fund or a Vanguard fund, when you get those proxy votes in the mail that say, hey, you can vote on so-and-so, and like most of us do, you shouldn't, but most of us do, is we don't know what to do, so we throw those proxy votes away. Well, guess what? You may have given the proxy vote power over to BlackRock and Vanguard. So they're actually voting on your behalf. BlackRock is taking your voice as a shareholder and voting their demands. And that, I think, if it would literally be like us electing someone that is totally opposite of our values and then voting opposite of our values on behalf of us. We'd be like, I'm not doing that anymore. Well, no shot I would do that. Well, it's what we do every day if we own these shares and that they vote on our behalf. So it's a really good point you bring up, Adam.
Vivek Ramaswamy, the guy who's like, starting to work his way up the presidential polls. He's kind of been the preeminent voice. Matter of fact, before we launched our fund, I didn't know who a Vivek Ramaswamy was.
You met him, right? Or didn't you have a meeting with him? Or
so his fund, he kind of launched Strive, which is elephant in the room for kind of what I do. So he launched his fund about a month or two before mine. And before I launched my fund, I had this like utopian dream of like, oh my gosh, Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson, all these guys are going to want to talk to me. And then I saw Vivek on TV, and naturally, I'm competitive. So I'm like, I hope he stammers or stumbles and says something dumb. And I just kept seeing him on TV. And then eventually I just kind of put my white flag up and I go, oh, crap, you are way smarter and way more articulate than me. But the dude, he's an intellectual powerhouse. I mean, let's just face it. So he is like a preeminent, like kind of voice on this. And he was talking about Chevron. So BlackRock basically stacked Chevron's board with a bunch of like ESG anti-oil individuals. So your board is full of people who are like, no, let's not take on that project. No, let's do clean energy, even though the clean energy is going to cost us more money. And even though there's no science behind it actually being better for the earth. Oh, we won't take on this project. But guess who comes in and takes the project on? PetroChina. China comes in and explores for oil right in our backyard. Anyways, who do you custody through? TD, now soon to be Schwab by the time this comes out?
Yeah, so Schwab and Fidelity, the two.
Okay. The reason I ask you that is because I was doing a Fidelity. I used to custody Fidelity too. I like Fidelity, but I'm going to throw them under the bus for 3 seconds. I did a 401k rollover call yesterday, and I'm greeted by a voice recognition chatbot, right? So right off the get-go, it's like, that just bothers me anyways.
Yeah.
While suckers like you and I scour through resumes to find the best and brightest to answer our phones with a smile on their face, these companies have robots answering their phone, and all of them do it. And the voice recognition goes, we strive to provide an inclusive environment where all people are treated with respect and courtesy. We value and honor the diverse backgrounds of our associates and clients, and we would appreciate your help in upholding these standards. Just kind of look at you through your nostrils, and guess what they do, David? They send you to India. So it's like, we value diversity of our associates. Let's send you to India. Like, you value diversity more than you value your customers, because next thing you know, we're greeted by an Indian call center where there's clearly a language barrier. And I'm just talking this client through the process of transferring their life freaking savings magically through the air to another financial institution. And this company, who thinks they're better than you, let's face it, is opting to have a person in an Indian call center press the button and click the mouse to move this person's life savings from point. Would you ever, as a small business owner based out of Atlanta, would you ever consider outsourcing your portfolio management department or outsourcing your client service department to India?
No, and look, the diversity, and this is coming from, so you want to talk about, I am a Jewish, Greek, Jamaican. Okay, do the math on the soup, the United Nations soup that is. And this is where I'm like, the diversity thing is such I don't understand why anyone would choose any professional based on how diverse it's like. We don't choose doctors that day. You know what's you want to know the most least diverse institution in America? The NBA. Okay, I would love for the NBA to start choosing who gets to play on teams based on how a percentage of diversity they are, because it's about talent. And so going back to what the boardroom's doing the same thing, where they're choosing people in these publicly traded companies to be on the board that based on their diversity. I just was at a meeting for a publicly traded company the other day, and one of the board members gets up and she goes, I am so proud that we have one of the most diverse boards on Wall Street. And I mean, just roaring applauses from the crowd. And I'm like, fantastic. Tell me, what have you done to provide shareholder value? What have you done to provide returns to your investors? So it's frustrating, and I hopefully Americans start to wake up and realize, look, what MLK dreamed of was a time where we could look at each other and truly, color, diversity doesn't matter. It's the contents of our heart. It's our character. It's what we do. How do we treat other people? I could care less the alphabet mix soup of diversity that we've got in us. I want to know, what have we done? What can we do? Where are we going? And how are we helping others? And that's really what matters.
Dude, well said. I'm going to rack that little bit right there. You're going to see that on social media. Well said, man. But yeah, and at the end of the day though, dude, it represents a competitive advantage that we have as small business owners, because we're not playing woke games when we field our team and when we conduct business. that's one less thing we need to worry about and deal with and think of. We're able to focus all of our time and energy on creating wonderful products, delighting our customers, growing our client base,
Yeah.
compensating our team members in a equitable way, not based on their melanin in their skin. We don't have the human resource department with the narc cards, as Dave Portnoy said. Like, unbelievable. It's a competitive advantage that we have.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, so we talked ETF.
Yep.
Let's go back to this because I kind of just blabbered and didn't give you time to talk. If an advisor comes up to you and says, David, like, I want to be like you, because it's hard to believe that. I still look at myself as like the young guy in the room, but clearly I'm not anymore. And there are advisors that look up to your practice now. And doesn't it seem like it was just yesterday? I know your story of building your business literally from the screws up. But now people look up to you. They want to emulate you. They want you to mentor them.
Yeah.
What are you telling an advisor who's like, hey, I need to launch an ETF because I want to be like, David in Atlanta?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you, it's talking about getting older. I've got gray hairs in my eyebrows from the process of starting this ETF. It's one of those things, when you're young and dumb, Adam, you do things because you think you can accomplish anything. You don't actually realize how hard they are. Look, it's great to be where we are today, right? Both of us, we've started our funds and we've got great assets in it and it's growing. But I will tell you, starting an ETF is not for the faint of heart. I would argue that it is a lose-lose for quite a bit of time, meaning we have to, and this is just me speaking, I'm sure it's the same for you. You have to pour significant assets up front to get a fund started. I mean, the upfront costs are, it's multiple six figures just to even think about starting a fund. That's not even revenue. That's just the cost to get it started. You get the attorney's fees, you got the SEC fees, you got underwrite. So that in itself is a challenge. But number two, and rightly so, in order to have a publicly traded fund, it's not like you start a fund today and then you put it on autopilot. The compliance requirements, and again, I think it should be that way, but the compliance requirements around keeping a fund and running a fund, I think it's more than what most people realize. And I was telling a buddy the other day, this was like, because he had an idea of wanting to do a fund. I was like, man, I'll just tell you right now that if you go down this road, number one, any free time that you think you have now, you can go ahead and kiss that goodbye, because at the end of the day, we've got our clients that we're serving, we've got our business that we're running. Managing and running an ETF is it's a whole nother business in itself. And so I don't know, very, very unprofitable. That's right. Yeah. One of these days we're going to make a profit, but so it is challenging, but the biggest thing is it's the compliance side of you gotta stay in compliance. And that in itself takes a full-time team. And so if I added up the amount of man hours, Amber's shaking her head yes. If I added up the amount of man hours that we have put to compliance when we started this fund, it's I think for most advisors that don't have the right team in place, it can destroy their business, meaning because you have to have the infrastructure and team in place just to keep your head above water, to make sure you're staying in compliance and that you're meeting all the regulatory rules, because it's quite a beat. It's a lot. So you may have a different perspective, but that's my perspective on it.
No, without a doubt. I think I don't even like thinking about how much money is getting set on fire on an annual basis. And it's funny. Some people think it's like, oh, your fund must be doing really well. It's like, nah, we're just breaking even, But what I keep fixing my eye on, I think it did inject my company with a level of pride. My fund in particular, it's kind of got this God-fearing, flag-waving thing. So it's planting a flag firmly, like it's almost like a culture thing. Like, this is what we do here, and if you don't like that, you probably don't want to work here. So that's cool. I haven't got to do the New York Stock Exchange thing, but I can't wait. It just seemed like, dude, I was looking at every one of your pictures with just absolute admiration. But you're right. Like if we had a couple advisors who run big practices. They were like, "Hey, I think I want to do that too." And my response to them was like, "Dude, just spend an afternoon building a really good looking, slick white paper. Just put together an SMA that your clients can plug into."
And I was gonna say the majority of funds. Not, I didn't mean to cut you out. I was having lunch in New York with this ETF veteran when we were up in New York, and one of the things he said to me was like, "You would be surprised how many ETFs get started every year that can't get above 10 million in assets, and they end up closing." And so this is something I commend. I looked at the assets on your fund for over 40 million. We're around the same level. To start a fund to be over 40 million. And to do that within its first year, that is not. We're kind of sitting here talking but that's not a normal thing to do for ETFs. And so I commend our clients that have trusted us, for the advisors that have put money in the fund, to raise $40 million in a fund. We're not even a full year for both of our funds. That is not normal. And so I think someone from the outside could see that and be like, "Oh, I could do that too." But it's the norm is you start a fund. The toughest thing is raising assets. And then if you don't get the assets, the cost can eat up the fund and it can be very challenging. So it's an amazing thing, but it's not an easy thing to make successful and to stay successful with it.
The percentages of failures, I don't want to throw
crazy.
a number out there. It's really high. It's like the number of sea turtles that get to the water and live, to use a South Carolina reference. But hey, let's talk maybe a little bit, because I can tell you one of the epiphanies that I've had over the last year. When we launched our fund, it kind of went viral, and that there was a bunch of articles written about it, just because it had the name and the ticker was cute, and people, I think, wanted to talk about it and share it and like it and all that. But what I learned was virality and clicks and shares doesn't necessarily translate to AUM. You are on Stuart Varney all the time. You're on Charles Payne all the time. You've got this Midas touch with the media, and I've watched you on the media. You're really good at it. I stink when the lights get real bright. I'm not as good. I'm good on the radio. I know I'm good on the radio, but I'm not good when TV cameras shine on me. But I would argue even that, it's good for your business, but just because, and I've heard you say this, that's why I'm saying it, but I want you to elaborate on it. Just because you get on Stuart Varney doesn't mean the next day people just start putting hundreds of millions of dollars into your management, right?
Yeah, look, TV is, so the first time I was ever on TV was with Maria Bartiromo, right? Talk about going right to the top, right? Right to the top. I was so nervous that I had memorized my talking points, because they said, "Hey, here's the topic." So she says, "Hey, David, thanks for coming on today." And I just start dumping my talking points. She didn't ask me a question. And then I ended my statement with a question that I thought she should ask me. It was an absolute train wreck. I mean, literally, the producers, after I got off, I was like, I just killed that day. The producers were like, first off, never do that again. And second off, you're probably not ever going to come back on. And so TV is a challenge. So then I did Fox Business AM. So Fox Business used to have this show from, I think it was 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. So I got bumped back down to the minors for 2 years. When I say this was brutal, so the show started at 4. Fox would send me a car to pick up at my house at 3:30. I'd usually be on the 5 o'clock hit time. So, I go to bed at 10. I'm waking up at 2. I'm trying not to wake my wife up. The car picks me up at 3:30. I'm at the Fox studio by 4:45. And I did this for 2 years. And it was absolutely, and I remember I just got to a point, I was like, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And this would have been in January of 2018. I got the call back up to the big leagues. Stuart Varney's producer was like, "David, hey, we'd like to have you on." And I got on. Obviously, I learned a lot in those 2 years. And I've been on it just about every week since that moment. But it also goes back to look, being on TV and national is great. But again, it's hard to do that consistently. It's hard to be on. It's like we all want to be in the majors, but we have to put in the hard work on the front end, and it's so it's been good. I've been grateful every time I go on. But no, I mean it's not. We have people that see us on TV and they call, but I will say that the fund's been interesting because I can absolutely see volume generally spike if I talk about it on TV. So like we were able to talk about it or not recently. We saw volume spike on the fund. So I think that's been a very cool thing because that's been a way we can talk about it. Or if Stuart Varney asks about the fund, he loves treasuries. We definitely see some action, but not a, hey, I want to work with you and move $50 million because I saw you for a minute on Fox Business. It usually doesn't work out like that.
Well, dude, you just shined a light on something. I just thought you had a better PR representative than me. But I shouldn't have thought that way. Why would I think that? Like, because I see you on Fox and CNBC, and I can't help but be a little bit jealous. Like, why doesn't anyone want to talk to me? Well, one, because I stink. And two, you literally logged the miles for 2 years in what you call the minor leagues. You were waking up at 2 a.m. These are big, buttoned up stations. They're not just going to let any idiot go on there and blabber. So, man, I had no idea you went through all of that. I believe it though, because when I see you on TV, I'm like, okay, he's confident. He's able to string his ideas together in a buttoned up. Really, that's the other thing. I have a knack. That's why all of our podcasts are like an hour and a half. I have a knack for blabbering. Like when you're on TV, you got to deliver the goods in a package.
Yeah. It's hard to get point, and also you don't want to be wonky. Our business can be so boring. Quantitative easing, and let's talk about monetary policy, and and so at the end of the day, it's also, I always say, this is not me, but the smartest people can take complex issues and make them very simple. And I think for our clients who are very smart, many of them, they still don't want to hear us bloviate all day about how the Federal Reserve is gonna, are they gonna quantitative ease, or are they gonna ease rates, or what's happening out of the ECB? Like, what is the way that we can take complex issues and simplify them? And so that is the most challenging part of communicating in a way that really people can understand and relate to. And that's been my biggest area that I try to work on and I think in my practice too, is just how can we communicate in a way that people understand it, and then they actually, because if they don't understand what we're saying, that we can't build trust. I always say, like, I trust someone more. If someone's running for office, if I feel like I can understand what they're saying, I instantly build trust. And I think it's just so important. So many of our politicians, and they just talk in ways that are just, they lose me. They talk, they try to really impress us with how great they sound or how articulate they can be. And for most Americans, we don't really want to hear that. We want to hear simple truths, but summarize the point and get it out in a way that's understandable.
Yeah, that advice should be well received from our GOP candidates at that most recent debate. Like, half of them just need to go just because of exactly what you said. It's like they're just scripted, and it's just gross. Well, hey, man, usually I start the show off. You still got a little more time, or you got a jet, dude?
I'm good.
We maybe another, I don't know, not gonna be that much longer, but usually I start the show off with like, a really cool one. I remember, dude, I'll give you a story. I remember I'm at one of these big conferences, and they did like a spotlight video on you, and you're like running up a hill.
Which I don't run, by the way, which is the irony.
I didn't know you. I was like, who's this guy? Like, I got to watch this guy talking about his life. This is well before I knew you. This had to be 5-6 years ago. But anyways, like, you told your story, and then everyone is on the edge of their seat. Like, give us that in theatric fashion.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick. So our story's pretty unique. It's I won't bore you with all of the details, but I told you a little bit about my grandfather. So my grandfather was a Cypriot Greek, so a Greek from Cyprus. born in 1896. So again, he actually fought in World War I. So Greece was a British colony. The British took over Greece after the monarchy fell. So my grandfather fought in World War I, which is crazy because most of us grandparents fought in World War II. So it just shows the age difference of my grandfather. After the war, went all over the world, went through Ellis Island, thought New York was way too busy. So he ended up in Jamaica, of all places, because Jamaica is a tiny island in the Caribbean. It reminded him of Cyprus. So have you ever been to Jamaica before, Adam? Okay, so Negril, yeah. So Montego Bay is there, right there in Jamaica. So my grandfather opened a barber shop right in Montego Bay. That's probably about 30 minutes from Negril. And so he was the only Greek on the island. So this would have been like 1940. And so my mom was actually born in Jamaica. So if you see my mom, she looks Greek, but she has a Jamaican accent. It's the craziest thing. Dad's side, Jewish, because Jamaica was also a British colony. And so you had a lot of Europeans that would come to Jamaica as kind of their second home. So it was just so my mom, it was, our story is interesting. It's a long story, but my parents were divorced at an early age. And my mom actually ended up coming to this country when she was 17. Jamaica had this Michael Manley, right about the time Castro was coming to power. Michael Manley was also coming to power, communist, Marxist. And so a lot of the businesses fled Jamaica. So my mom, 17, tried to come for a better life, ended up coming here for college, Kalamazoo, Western Michigan University up in Michigan. And so, but my mom ended up raising me and my two sisters all on her own. So single mom, she's the hardest working person I know. And so obviously if you're in a single parent household, I mean, life was fine, but it's just tough, right? Financially. And so always growing up, I always said, one day I'm going to do something great that I can provide for my mom and I can provide for my family. And there was this family that was so gracious to us. One my friend that I met from church, his dad actually turned out to be a portfolio manager for Templeton, worked right under Sir John Templeton. And this family was so gracious to us. I mean, if they were going to a theme park, they would ask our family to go with them. If they were going out of town, I don't know why, but they were so gracious that they would bless our family. And I remember saying at a little age, okay, whatever Derek's dad is doing, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do when I grow up. And so from early on, I was like, oh, I want to do finance somehow. So ended up going into finance, undergrad, and graduated, worked for a firm for 7 years. And about 11 years ago, decided to start our company. And it's one of those stories of, which maybe like a lot of our businesses, it was started with nothing. I mean, our business, to see what God's done in the last 10, 11 years has been nothing short of just a miracle. And so started the business, and man, it's been 11 years of just grind. The story is, it's amazing how you can become an overnight success after 10 years. And so it really has been just God has provided the right clients, and he's provided us growth. We bought our building recently in Marietta, which is another God providing story of him providing the ability for us to do that. And so, man, it's been a pretty interesting story, but I think it's a little bit of the American dream story in that.
You had to have had I've seen pictures of your kids. How old is your oldest?
Yeah, so our daughter, Bella's 6, Sophia, our middle daughter, was 4, and our son's 2.
Okay, got it. All right, I'm thinking I'm getting my date. So you started the business before they were born, but you were working at that company for 7 years.
Yeah.
That transition from collecting a consistent W-2 to like, okay, now stare out at the abyss and eat glass and start this thing from the ground up. That had to be a terrifying season. Yeah,
it was, but it's amazing, and I tell people all the time. So at that time, right, I moved in with I had a townhome. I moved back home with my mom. I sold my car. I also just was starting to date my dream girl, which was now my wife. So the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. I start dating her. I'm broke. I move back home with my mom, and I don't have a car. And then I was this big entrepreneur.
Can we just stop and unpack that for a second? Some of your earliest clients put a little trust in you and gave you their life savings. You were living with your mom.
I literally, because I said, if my clients knew that I was living with my mom and I didn't have a car, they would probably say, what in the, like, who is this guy? I actually think there was a client in our office the other day that was my early client of 11 years. And I told her, I was like, you trusted in me when you had no reason to. And I was like, I will forever be grateful for that. But yeah, it was a bumpy time there early on.
You don't want to. I've got a similar thing going on. I didn't have an office for a while. I was working out of like a grocery store cafeteria.
A grocery store cafeteria.
I don't tell people. At least I didn't live with my mom before you start laughing.
Yeah. That is, yeah.
But I don't even want to tell people that up until like nowish, right? 10 years later.
I've actually never said that publicly, so I might cut this out of my podcast part. I'm just kidding.
Dude, it's so good. That's the good stuff, though, man.
For sure.
And so very cool, dude.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then you built the thing up, and your office, another thing, I'm just jealous of that cool office you've got. We still have like 5 individual suites. It's like Benny Hill. You go from one to the other, and you got this beautiful office in Marietta with everything is well situated. You got a golf simulator in your office. My gosh, man.
It's so insane. That's about the dumbest thing ever, because I was like, you know what? Our clients are retirees. They play golf. Let's put a golf simulator in our office. Well, I don't have time to play golf, right? And you may be similar. We have young kids. I'm running a business. And so, but the golf simulator is awesome because I drop the kids at school at 7:20. My day usually doesn't start till 9. I got an hour that I can hit some golf balls in the morning, but I really wish I would have put it at home because my wife goes to bed, kids go to bed. It's 9 o'clock. I find myself driving back up to the office to hit golf balls. So if you're going to put in a simulator anywhere, you might want to put it at your house.
Put it in your garage.
Yeah.
Well, it's got to be a cool, like, you know what? I'll talk one more thing before we hang up. So speaking of golf, I was having like breakfast with you at the golf event, like a industry golf event.
In Doral or down in Miami, I think.
Yeah. And I remember like you were like visually troubled. Like you're looking at your phone, you're stressed, and you're like, dude, I just had some turnover, and this person, was in charge of this, and this, payroll, a bunch of stuff. And I remember, from my seat, I was just like, don't worry about it, David. Everything will be better on the other side of this. Easy for me to say, but you were like in it. Like you were in the throes of it. Now, You're through that and in a better place because of it. But I'll be if 2 months later, I call you up in the same exact place you were in, like panicking, like, David, dude, I had some turnover. This person did this, and this, and this. And you were like, yeah, man, that stinks, but you'll be better in a little bit. Sometimes you just need someone to vent to, but you did give me some good recommendations. We work with the similar compliance outfit now. Been really happy with them.
Yeah. But no, you're right.
I never thanked you for that, man. Thank you for being a voice of reason, and heck, I think you even recited a little scripture to me on that phone call, and I walked away from that call. I was literally like I had to step away from all my kids and my wife to talk to you about like compliance and what to do. And thank you for that guidance you gave me. And it's comforting to know I got someone like you a phone call away to lean into when stuff like that happens. And undoubtedly more of it will happen, I'm sure.
Well, man, give me a hug through the screen. Get over here, man. It's no, you know what? God is good, and He puts these people in our lives, and it's just. But it's a reminder. This is no matter what you're doing. Like nothing good in life is easy. Right? You want to be a good father. You want to be a good husband. Guess what? It's not going to be easy. The best things in life are just hard, right? You want to be a big entrepreneur and you want to run a company. It's going to be hard, right? But the most rewarding and fulfilling moments are going through those hard times and getting to the other side. Because again, this is the piece. I don't know how if you're not a Christian or you're not a believer, how you can take risk. Because part of what gives me the confidence to take risk and to go through this is because I know God is ultimately steering the ship. He ultimately provides. He ultimately carries us through. And I mean, if it wasn't for that, then you would have to be cutthroat and you would have to step on the little people. You would have to do all the things to be in charge and be in control. But when you say, you know what, God, I don't really know the answer. I don't really know the outcome, but I trust and know the one that is, and like that Psalm says, the creator of heaven and earth, right? I mean, there's no more powerful friend than the guy that created the earth, right? I mean, it's like, I'm one phone call away, you're one phone call away from me, but we're also one phone call away from the creator of the universe. And I mean, whatever you want to do, if you're someone that wants to start a business, if you're someone that, if you have a dream in your heart, it's God put that there. But if we try to do it all on our own strength, man, talk about burnout and failure. And so that's why I think even through challenging times, God is good, and he really is. So I'm glad, man. But it's encouraging to hear that you were able to go through that, and we go through the same things, which is
we'll go through it again, I'm sure, unfortunately,
right.
but we'll come out of it in a better place because of it. All right, I think that's a good way to end our recording here today. But to the people who work with me, give David's firm a good hard look. Look up his ticker is FIAX and do your due diligence on it. But from everything that you heard about today, it's a short-term bond fund with a options overlay in order to squeeze a little bit more yield. And this isn't a plea just to support a small business, because you started our show off with this idea that I think some Christians, some conservatives, they just expect you to work with them because they share your worldview. But it's like, I'm going to work with you because you share my worldview, but more importantly, because you create a product or service that is of great value, right? Like,
yeah,
one could argue the My Pillow guy pillows stink. So your fund, I think people have a pretty good understanding of, your value system and your beliefs. And to boot, you offer a short-term, principal protected, wonderfully yielding liquid instrument that people can plug into that's going to yield a heck of a lot more than what they can fetch in other short-term bond funds and in money market funds and things that people traditionally look to scratch the same itch. So
that's right.
FIAX a look.
I appreciate that. And obviously bond funds, your principal can fluctuate just based on the movement of the bonds and the options prices, but you're spot on as far as that goes. And also we're going to simulcast this on our podcast. I know your clients know about it, but for our clients that are just hearing this for the first time, Adam's ETF is the YALL, is the ticker symbol YALL ETF. Again, if you want to invest in equities, and you just, David, what do I buy the SPY? Do I buy QQQ? YALL, which again, YALL ticker symbol, is a great way for you to have equity exposure, but also to make sure you're owning companies that ultimately, I think, in my opinion, are going to continue to drive growth, mainly because they're not focusing on these areas that are just distractions from providing shareholders value and from providing shareholders profit. So again, for our listeners, YALL is the ETF ticker, and we'd love for you to check that out as well. But Adam, man, I appreciate it. This was awesome. I'd love to do this again. Maybe we can jump on again, because I know our viewers, I think, would get a lot out of it.
Awesome. David, thank you, sir.
All right, man. Sounds good. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
All right, bye-bye.